Hi family, thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Today is going to be a very interesting and fun day. So today we are going to start our testing of different yeasts. We have 7 lined up here that we are going to do small batches of each, and we're going to see how it all plays out, how it tastes, what it does, what's different, what's good, bad, whatever might happen. It's going to be interesting.
We're trying an experiment with 7 different yeasts, including 1 bread yeast. We've been off-screen arguing
A little bit
about how yeast works and what the results will be. So this is going to be hopefully an awesome experiment where we're going to learn a lot about yeast. That's our hope.
Yeah.
Each of them we kind of chose basically just on the descriptions we liked the best. We tend to like sweeter, like more fizzy kind of meads. So far to this point, we've just been trying to get meads to work.
Yeah, we've just been kind of picking any old yeast and saying, well, this is one that we had, that we bought, and let's give that one a shot. But we've never actually like evaluated the different types to see.
Yeah, it's been based a lot on just what we had on hand.
Yeah.
And then occasionally when we were actually pulling up a recipe, we would use the specific one that recipe required. But for the ones that we just kind of pulled out of our heads, we've just been using whatever we had. I tried doing a bit of research about these yeasts, and it will make your eyes go cross. Like even something like the Red Star Premier Rogue has a different name, like Premier Red. So that makes things kind of more complicated to compare and contrast.
So we're going to be targeting a 10% alcohol content, which should mean that every one of these yeasts gets to 10%. I don't think any of them have a tolerance less than that. Is that right? So to that extent, we are trying to keep the sample the same. We're going to be making the must in the same barrel, and then separating it out and adding in the yeast in measured amounts to try to keep it as consistent as possible.
So his hypothesis is that if we keep everything consistent and we have all that we should get a consistent 10% across the board in all of the yeasts. My hypothesis, though, is that the yeasts are going to go at different rates and they're going to get to different percentages. So we'll see. We'll see how this works. I will really quickly go through each one and just a couple of features of either like why we selected it or what it's known for, or what the manufacturers kind of say about it. So the first one is, no particular order, is the Premier. Maybe I won't actually try to say these names.
That's what I was just going to say.
It's French. We'll put it in the description, and you guys can figure it out. But basically, this yeast is supposed to have a 12 to 14% alcohol tolerance. Its temperature tolerance is about 18 to 30 degrees Celsius, 64 to 86 Fahrenheit. Basically, it's supposed to be a slow fermenter that doesn't go as dry as most yeasts. And according to the manufacturers, when it's actually fermented at a cooler temperature, it will actually produce a sweeter taste. So
we're just coming out of winter here, so it's definitely cool enough for us to be doing that.
The next one we're going to do is Loveland 71B by Lallemand Brewing. This one has an alcohol percentage of up to 14%. Its temperature tolerance is 15 to 30 degrees Celsius, which is about a 59 to 86 Fahrenheit. We've actually used this one the most. Again, like I mentioned before, only because it's what we had on hand. We bought it in bulk and just pretty much have used this yeast along with bread yeast. So it's a brand that we have some familiarity with. It's supposed to be an easy yeast to work with, but it does mature quickly, which means that it can easily go over its tolerance, which we have definitely experienced that.
Definitely seen that, yeah.
It's supposed to be a semi-sweet taste that is a good one to back sweeten with. So the 71B is supposed to be good for darker fruits like your blackberries and your blueberries. Then the other one that we have is the Red Star Premier Rogue. Its alcohol tolerance is, it's either 14 or 16%. I've found contradicting information on this one. Its temperature tolerance is about 18 to 30 degrees Celsius, which is 64 to 86 Fahrenheit. It's also known as pasture red, and Like I said, that makes things kind of confusing with their multiple names. But this is actually the one that we're most skeptical. The word that he said. Because this is supposed to be a dry yeast. It's supposed to be ideal for like Cabernets and Merlots, which we're not particularly fond of. It's a fast fermenter, and it's supposed to have a good alcohol tolerance cap. The next one we're going to try out is a bread yeast. Yeah. It is notoriously complained about online as being a cheap, bad choice, but we made
one batch with it, I think, or did we?
We've made a couple batches with it, okay. And we didn't have any problems with the results. We just used that because it's what we had.
Well, I think when we did our first tasting, it's very footy. It's very strong, and
it took like
matured. It took like a year for it to calm down a bit.
And its alcohol tolerance is way too difficult to figure out.
All over the frickin' board.
Its temperature thing is, who knows. The two big issues that I've seen with the bread yeast that I've seen from looking this up is that A, it's supposed to have a bad taste, and B, it's really unpredictable. Next one I have is champagne yeast. I'm not going to say this whole thing out loud. I will mess it up. It has an alcohol tolerance of 18%. Temperature tolerance of 10 to 30 degrees Celsius, which is 50 to 86 Fahrenheit. It was kind of a flip of a coin between this EC1118, I think I did that right, and the V116 from Lalavan. I personally couldn't tell the differences between the two.
By description?
By description. Maybe in the future we can do a test comparing those two. This particular champagne yeast is supposed to be a neutral yeast so that it has very little effect on the honey character, and in theory it should be our favorite because it is right there in our profile, our preferred profile. It does make me a little concerned because of its high alcohol tolerance.
What was that? It was like 18?
18%.
Ooh, yeah.
The next one is the Lalavan D47. This one has an alcohol tolerance up to 15%. Its temperature tolerance is 15 to 30 degrees Celsius, which is 59 to 86 Fahrenheit. This is supposed to be your mead making staple. It's ideal for pulling out fruity flavors. In fact, we used it in our peach mead, which is why I only have half a packet. This yeast, though, apparently does need rich nutrients.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's like important when you use this yeast that you do things like our, what is it called? The yeast nutrient and
the yeast nutrient
Fermaid O.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're both nutrients, but fermentation nutrient and yeast nutrient.
Yeah. So we're still not totally certain why you use these things. I mean, we know why now you use them. We're just not totally certain which one's which. But from what we've read, honey doesn't have a lot of minerals and nitrogen in it naturally, and yeast needs those things to kind of latch onto in order to work. So you add Fermaid O and yeast nutrients to add those back into your mead. I don't know which one's which. I barely understand that part of it.
Yeah. I've also heard online too that, you know, you don't have to go with the nutrients. You can do, I've heard that like raisins are like nutrient rich for making meads. So you can add a bunch of raisins when you're doing your fermentation, and that could also help if you're not wanting to go buy specific things. But you still risk that it stalls and, you know, whatever. So
yeah, if you want to be like 100% natural, you can kind of avoid these things and try using more things, more naturally grown things. We're not savvy enough to know what's what, so we just use those because the recipe said to do it. And we do it now every time because we found that it just makes everything run smooth.
Looking for consistency too.
One last thing about D47, which makes it popular, is that it's supposed to accentuate the honey flavor. And then actually the one I'm most excited about is the Red Star Premier Blanc. It has an alcohol tolerance of 13 to 15%, temperature tolerance of 15 to 30 degrees Celsius. That's 59 to 86 Fahrenheit. And the reason I'm most excited about this champagne yeast is because it's got the same profile as the Lalavan one, but it doesn't have the higher alcohol tolerance. I don't know. Basically, it has a neutral taste. It's almost identical to the Loveland one. It just doesn't have the same alcohol tolerance.
As far as the must goes too, we are going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to use, I mean, I guess it's technically not a mead, it's a melomel or whatever they call it. When we are going to add juice to it.
Yeah, so we're going to do this a little differently than we've seen like other YouTubers do their yeast tests. Usually, most people will just have just the honey and try to keep it authentic to the honey flavor as possible so that they get an authentic taste to it. But we thought ours are always gonna have probably fruit and flavor to them.
Yeah.
So why don't we try to make it more realistic to what we might be using in the future? So we're actually going to have juice in our must.
And
So it's technically a melomel.
Yeah, so we went organic juices. Again, we wanted to try keeping it consistent because we're going to be mixing it all in one, but then separating it out into the different samples.
We've never used juice before, but we're going to try to use juice to kind of bring some flavor and
Complexity. Bring more complexity to it.
to the mead, because our thinking is that's going to be more true to what we're making in the future.
Yeah.
Again, we're learning, so this may be a complete waste of our time, and we may have to do a traditional one. But
We can do that. We can cross that bridge later.
yeah.
Our kitchen's been taken over with sanitation, so we will be
We have a very little kitchen.
bringing things into focus and making the must, and yeah, we'll go from there. So
We're also going to do everything in metric so that our brains don't break when we're trying to do all these conversions later.
yep. Hello, honey. That's a lot of honey. All right, so that's where we're starting in. Just for now, we got
So that's where we're starting with the honey.
with the honey. Works pretty good. Making a big batch this time.
Okay.
3 of these. All right, then mix, mix, mix. On the edges.
Yeah, in hindsight, we probably should have put 3.5 kilos of
Honey first to start.
Yeah.
1.091.
Ooh, 1.091. What is that percentage?
That percentage is 11.7.
Just whining.
And so we finally got it all filled up. We got it to the side. We're going to keep an eye on it for the next hour or so to make sure they activate. We got about probably a gallon.
A gallon of must
left.
left. So we'll probably throw it into one of our carboys, and after we make sure that all the yeasts activate, we'll make a batch from one of the random yeasts that we pick. So we'll show the results, which will be a few weeks for us, but it will probably be next week for you.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. At least the initial results.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. Please
Thanks for
subscribe.
watching. All right, take care, everyone.